If you told me 5 years ago when I started this channel that I would go through the process of writing a script and making a video about the darkest period in my own personal history, I would have immediately shut you up and denied you, retorting by saying that I would never share such private information to a bunch of strangers on the internet. 5 years ago, I created this channel to escape the situation I was in and pretend that I was just another guy who liked playing video games and wanted to make others happy with my hobby. And while nothing is inherently false in that, I do love video games and I want others to enjoy the Let's Plays I make, it isn't the full truth either. When I wasn't on the mic recording my videos, I was living my own personal hell day in and day out, stuck in a purgatory of shame and negativity that I thought would never end. Well, that cycle has ended now, and while I would be lying if I said I wasn't still feeling the effects of it, I feel comfortable enough to talk about it now. Not to garner sympathy, attract attention, or use you viewers in place of a therapist, but because I want to help people that may be stuck in their own terrible situations and clicked on this video because of the title. To understand everything I went through, I first need to give some background on my family. Growing up, I was and still am the youngest of six. I have three sisters and two brothers. I had my mom, my dad, and there was even a dog. The first pet I had, and my favorite good boy, Jax. Nothing was too particularly wrong or different from my family compared to anybody else's. I went to school. I was an annoying little nuisance to my sister. I tried to play Smash Bros. And Mario Party with my brothers whenever they booted up the family 64. I had a grade school crush on a girl I liked in my class. And I bargained with my dad to take me to McDonald's on Saturdays for breakfast because I wanted to play the Kirby Air Ride City trial mode in the play area and show off to the other 5-year-olds by collecting all the Dragoon parts. Yeah, my siblings didn't involve me too much in anything, but that's because I was the youngest. My sister, the next youngest, was 5 years older than me, and all my other siblings were even older. My oldest sister being a whole 18 years older than me. I knew they wanted to do grown up stuff together, so I let them. Which is why it isn't too surprising the family video game consoles became my best source of entertainment. I replayed Paper Mario dozens of times, learning how to read from that game's dialogue, always getting to chapter 6 and restarting from the very beginning when I couldn't get past Huff and Puff. Playing Mario 64 over and over again to the point where I did self imposed challenges of beating levels using only one hand, being too scared to play the Zelda games because I saw the moon in Majora's Mask and didn't touch the series again until Twilight Princess. I could go on forever about all the games I played and how my taste in video games has evolved over the years, and while that is an interesting idea to be shelved for another video, that wasn't exactly the point I was trying to make. I was a lonely kid growing up. I had extreme social anxiety that made it difficult for me to interact with my peers, and I had really bad exercise induced asthma that also made me miserable when I was forced to participate in the active team building exercises and sports that every elementary school teacher would try to awkwardly force upon the class. From the start of my life, I was a social outcast. I wasn't necessarily bullied, but none of the other kids or teachers really knew how to interact with me, and I was fine with that. I never wanted to try interacting with other kids because, quite frankly, I thought most of them were stupid. When other kids were counting up to three, I was multiplying by three. When my peers were still struggling with reading words longer than 5 letters, I was reading nonfiction science books about the planets in our solar system. And when the others around me were being taught religion and getting indoctrinated into their own faiths, I started questioning whether God was even real, and the more my dad told me about God during nightly prayer sessions before bed, the more I doubted his existence until I ultimately came to my own conclusion that there is no way one single being could have created the beautiful universe we live in and decided that we, the people on one solitary rock in space, are the most important creation they ever made. So, yeah, I stayed as a socially awkward person my whole childhood. When I was about 6 years old, my parents divorced. My mom got sick of my dad and she decided she wanted to separate from him, taking me, my sister, brother, and the rest of my older siblings followed her. As a kid, I never really understood why she did something so intense. I mean, yeah, my dad was a bit eccentric, but it's not like he was a bad person. I also really didn't want to be going back and forth between my mom and my dad with the split custody. The drive was an hour and a half long, which feels like an eternity to a kid. And all my video games were at my dad's. What was I going to do with my free time during the school week? Do homework? Actually interact with other people? I hated the former, and the latter genuinely terrified me. Despite the new environment, I was able to slowly adapt. I was able to gradually start finding other kids my age that I had interests in common with and was able to connect with. I was finally old enough where my siblings would start begrudgingly including me in conversations now that I could understand the full context of some of the stuff they were talking about. I became an uncle during that time, with my oldest sister having her first kid when I was 8 years old. I fell into a rhythm. I would do homework on the weekdays and binge read books during my free time. And then when I was at my dad's place during the weekends, I would play all the video games I could to try and cram in as many hours during a short 2 day time span. I kept following that routine year after year, keeping up with my studies, reading books, playing video games, and sometimes interacting with my friends and family. Maybe not the most organized and neat life with my parents being separated, but I managed to make do with what I had. Honestly, if that type of lifestyle lasted until I was 18, I probably would have had a relatively normal and fulfilling childhood and adolescence. But just when I started to think that my easygoing lifestyle would last for the foreseeable future, bad news hit. Really bad news. April of 2014 was when the first warning signs hit. One day after school, I was working on my English homework when I overheard my mom in the kitchen. She was complaining about feeling a little bit sick. Nothing too serious, she wasn't bedridden or anything. She just felt a bit off, and one weird symptom of her ailment was that her sense of taste wasn't quite right. When she bit into a carrot, her face puckered up and she mentioned that it tasted sour. Odd, but nothing life threatening. It would pass. My mom couldn't afford unnecessary doctor visits anyway. A couple days passed and her taste buds were still not working correctly. A bit concerning, but it should be fine, right? A few more days passed, and when I got back from school, I came home to an unsettling atmosphere. My mom and my eldest sister were sitting at the table. My mom crying and my sister comforting her. Both of them tried to immediately put up an act when they noticed me, but it was too late. I already knew something was up. Something they didn't want to tell me. What are you guys doing? Oh, nothing. We were just talking. You can ignore. No, he deserves to know too. The truth is, I went to the ER today. They did an x ray and they noticed I have a tumor. What? What do you mean? I have cancer. I, uh, it's breast cancer, right? I mean, can't they just remove it in that case? No, it's liver cancer. When my mom stated that, I could feel the final nail in the coffin slowly getting hammered in. I was only 12, but even I knew the chances of surviving cancer were near impossible no matter how headstrong you were. I knew that I would be watching my own mother slowly become more ill, suffering from gradually increasing pain throughout the next several months, slowly deteriorating, not just physically, but also mentally. My throat constricted, attempting my best to hold back my tears, trying my best to not cry in front of her and make her feel worse. I said this in response. Don't worry, I know you'll be able to survive this. I lied, not to her, but to myself. I didn't want to believe that my mom had such a short time limit on the rest of her life. I wanted to believe that if my mom could keep fighting and that if I supported her, she would be able to overcome all odds like the protagonists of the books I read. I wanted to hold on to some slim margin of hope that maybe everything would be all right. Perhaps the cancer would simply stop spreading. Maybe a miracle cure would be discovered within the next year and mom would be all right. Holding on to my thinly veiled desperation for normalcy, I continued on with my life, focusing all my efforts into anything but acknowledging the elephant in the room. The months arduously passed by. At first, I was able to continue on like normal. While the thoughts of my mom's cancer was always lingering in the background, I was too focused on school to really give it more than a passing thought, and my mom was also putting up a good front. In fact, she actually seemed livelier than usual. Typically, she was always nervous about what other people thought of her and whether or not she was doing the right thing at any given time, but now she was boldly doing what she wanted, not caring if she made a mistake in front of others. Her parental filter also started slipping off more often. Normally, she would put up some front to not make lewd jokes or swear too much in front of me. But over the course of the months, she started revealing her uncouth sense of humor, and I found it fun. For the first time, I was able to see my mom not as a parent, but as the person she truly was at heart. It felt like I was finally able to understand her as a person with natural flaws, and I loved and respected her even more for that. She wasn't perfect, and she knew that. She embraced it during the last months of her life. She channeled a feeling of confidence that I looked up to and wanted to replicate in my own life. After those first few months, things took a darker turn. At this point, the pain of the cancer was growing worse. My mom had to start taking painkillers, which inhibited some of her mental clarity. Her confidence faded away, replaced with a looming, growing sense of fear of a fear of death and a fear of what will happen to her children when she passes. She took longer to get out of bed in the mornings, and while she still tried to maintain that strong image, I could hear her moaning in pain whenever she was in her room. I felt miserable being around her. I wanted to help her, but there was absolutely nothing I could do besides play along. I felt so pathetic and useless during that time. It was all I could do to try and escape from reality to play some video games at my dad's place during the weekends. Over the last few months of my mom's life, I was slowly watching her degrade. The pain getting worse, and the doctor prescribing stronger painkillers, each having stronger side effects than the last. It was inevitable that she would start taking strong opioids to reduce the pain. And it truly was so awful to listen to that. I absolutely refused to check on her in her room. I could hear her hallucinating, being drawn into fantasy worlds completely devoid from reality. She started to forget the names of her children. She couldn't recall the names of any of her kids besides my third sister. And yes, I wanted to check in on her, but if I walked in there and she didn't recognize me, even the thought of something like that absolutely crushed my soul. And if I actually experienced that myself, part of me knew I would never be able to emotionally recover. I wanted her to be okay. I was still holding on to the faint hope that maybe something could happen to cure her. A miracle, a divine intervention, maybe. Anything, just anything to end her suffering. Anything, please, just let it end already. I remember the day well. It was a Saturday night in January of 2015. And I was playing Mario Kart 8 on the Wii U at my dad's place. My dad knocked on the door and peered through. "Dominic, we need to go." With just that simple sentence, I understood what he meant. Both of us entered the car, and the vehicle was filled with a tense silence as my dad started the ignition and began driving. The 90-minute drive I got so acclimated to between my parents' houses felt like that same eternal drive I was complaining about every time I had to ride it as a kid. I had a million things I wanted to say and ask, but I didn't know where to start. I had no idea how to formulate my thoughts into words. I wasn't even able to cry because it felt like my emotions got zapped with the defibrillator. The frigid air in the car stuck to my skin and wrapped its fingers around my chest, almost as if preparing me for the reality I had to confront at my mom's place. The car rolled to a stop in front of my mom's condo. I stepped out into the bitter night breeze and took a moment to appreciate the house and live in the moment. I knew that when I stepped through that front door, my life would change forever. I didn't know what tomorrow had in store for me, but it was all I could do to at least boldly face what today had in store for me. I wanted to run away. I really wanted to sprint for the hills and never come back. But I forced my legs to approach the house. I had to confront the reality I was stuck in. It would be disrespectful to Mom if I ran away from her death. I had to accept reality. I stepped through the entrance, my dad following closely behind me, and I was met with a dreadful mood like I expected. All my siblings and my nieces and nephews were all gathered in the cramped living room. My niece and nephew playing on an iPad, oblivious to the situation. My siblings all dead silent. My oldest sister took the initiative and silently guided us to Mom's room upstairs. She quietly pried the door open, and against my better judgment, I glanced at what lied beyond. The room looked largely the same, but on the bed, there was a mass being covered by what looked like a black tarp? A bag? I shuddered and immediately looked away. I didn't want to stare anymore. That was the confirmation I needed to truly accept the facts. Mom is dead. There is no fantasy magic or sci-fi technology that could revive her. I trudged down the stairs and gloomily grabbed a seat in the living room with the others. I just stared at the floor in silence, trying to shed a single tear but unable to due to how emotionally overstimulated I was. The others were talking, they were planning what to grab for dinner, trying to avoid thinking about the death of their mom and at least forcing everyone to eat something instead of just moping. I tuned out of the conversation, just nodding whenever anybody pointed at or talked to me. So, what now? I was lost in thought as I had to process how my life would change. I already started school where my mom lived. Was I going to live with my dad now? But it was halfway through the school year. Surely I would be able to finish the school year and live with my siblings in the meantime. What was going to happen to me? Why did I suddenly feel an onset of dread when I thought about the future? I was terrified. Overwhelmingly so. I was too distraught to physically say anything, and I was too scared to even try. I was stuck in a stupor, unable to perceive the reality around me. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I was spiraling downward a train of negative thought, cursing my situation, cursing my luck, and cursing myself for not appreciating the time I had with my mom while she was still around. I was a terrible son. I didn't respect her. I took her for granted. I was selfish while she worked so hard to take care of me. Everything was my fault. It was my fault Mom died. Maybe if I hadn't been born, my mom would have lived a more fulfilling life. Maybe she wouldn't have died only in her 50s. I knew logically that none of the events that transpired were my fault, but emotionally, I felt extremely guilty, as if I personally murdered her. And even if I knew I was wrong for thinking that, this initial seed of guilt and self-loathing is what led me to sink to the depression I would experience in the coming years. Dominic, you're living with me now. My dad spoke up, jolting me out of my daze. To add on to the shock of losing my mom, I had to suddenly move? What, right now? I yelled. If you want to go back with me right now, my dad suggested, heavily implying he would prefer it that way. But what about school? I can't just suddenly move. I'm in the middle of the school year and I have homework and projects to work on that I need to turn in. You can just go back to school there. Besides, you have all your video games back there. But I have friends here. I'd rather live here even if you do have my video games. That's not happening. You're living with me. But what? No, that's not what mom would have wanted. It is. It was written in her will. My dad yelled and I fell silent. Me living with dad was in her will? No, that couldn't have been true. Even I knew that I went to school at her place because she wanted me to have as little interaction with my dad as possible. I couldn't conceit myself into thinking she wrote his custody of me in her will. I I don't believe you. Well, it's true either way, whether you believe me or not. No, it's not true. You're lying. It was written in her will. Then show me the will. I don't have it on me. Oh, how convenient. She told me she wanted me to take care of you. When? She never said that. She would never say that. How would you know what she wanted? You kept coming over to my place to avoid her. And you got married to another woman while mom was on her deathbed. You don't actually care about her. Don't you ever say that again. I loved her, but she decided to divorce me. Oh, is that why you were getting married while she was suffering through immense pain? What did you do to support her when she was suffering? I came over and visited her. Yeah, you only visited. You didn't have to live with her every single day and try to live life pretending that everything was normal and alright. You only want me to live with you so you can control me. Yes, I'm controlling you so you don't throw your own life away by living with your siblings. They can't take care of a kid like you. I'm 13. I'm old enough to take care of myself. Exactly my point. You're not an adult. But you're coming with me. No, even if I did come with you, I still need to pack up my stuff here. Fine. I'll pick you up tomorrow. No, I have school this week. That doesn't matter. I can't just leave here without saying goodbye to my friends. You have a week to prepare. My dad huffed and left the house, leaving me with the rest of my family staring at the entrance. My sisters tried to console me and they took my side in the argument, but I was too drained to do anything. My emotions finally caught up to me, and for the rest of that night, I spent it uncontrollably sobbing until I was asleep. That night, I had a dream that I was with mom and she was still alive, and when I woke up the next day and realized what happened the night before, I felt an intense wave of grief for the rest of the day. The whole day passed by in a blur, as if I was watching a VHS tape and the VCR was set both on rewind and fast forward simultaneously. I didn't know how fast time was passing. I was lost in my own thoughts, time flying by when I wanted time to think, but crawling to a halt whenever I had some awareness of my surroundings. I hardly remember that day, but I do remember having a conversation with my oldest sister. Why aren't you picking up your stuff? My sister asked. I'm not going with him. I'm finishing the school year. You know, even if he's wrong for doing this, he does have legal custody over you. What? Why? It wasn't written in any will. You are his kid, and he's the only parent alive. He has rights to your custody. Couldn't we just remove those rights? That's nearly impossible. Well, what about our sister? She's pretty close to my age. She's 18. He doesn't have any power over her anymore. What? I'm forced to live there and I'm going to be alone? Yes, unfortunately. That's why you should pack anything you need here before he comes back. No, I'm going to stay here no matter what he does. At least take the house phone with you. Everybody else has their own phone besides you. Take it, just in case. I heeded my sister's advice. She was right. Just in case. Still, I imagined I would at least be able to say my farewells to my siblings before I had to move. My primary focus was on school for the week. I absolutely needed to say goodbye to everybody and make sure my friends got a proper explanation of what was happening. The next day was school, and I spent the day making my rounds and talking to all my friends that I could. Many of them were surprised or in distress over my situation, but I tried to smile and assure them that I would be okay. I did most everything I needed to do on the first day. I planned on spending the rest of the week enjoying my last moments in the school. I still had a few more days to hang out with friends and family before leaving. The next day, I attended school and tried to immerse myself in my classes and hang out with friends. It was a bittersweet feeling knowing that there were a fair amount of people that cared about me and were worried about me. And I wished I could have savored those moments forever, but the school day did eventually have to come to an end. And when it did, I was met with an awful surprise. My dad was waiting for me right outside the front doors of the school, watching the flood of kids coming out of the building, searching for me specifically. What the fuck was he doing? My heart race accelerated. I glanced back out and saw him again. Did he not feel self-conscious watching a whole parade of kids walk out of a school in plain sight? I had to get to the bus to go home, but he was in between the school and the buses. I didn't have all day to try and hide from him. If I was going to get past him, I had to blend in with the rest of the students. I tried to tuck myself in the crowd of students, and at first I thought he didn't see me, but a few moments later I saw him lock eyes on me. Shit! He noticed me. Cursing my noticeable height, I sped up my pace. If I could make it to the bus, I might be safe. I mean, he wouldn't make a scene on the bus, he would just drive to the house, delaying the inevitable, but it possibly gave me an opportunity to say goodbye to my family. I speed walked to the bus, but my dad was faster with his brisk jog. He caught up to me, forcefully grabbing my wrist and quite literally dragging me to his car. I screamed, I kicked, I even bit him, but inevitably my dad won the strength competition and forced me into the car. He quickly turned on the ignition and started driving before I could even think of opening the door and running away. Take me home! I am. No, take me to my family! I am. Your new wife and her kids are not my family. Take me to my actual brothers and sisters. No. You said I had a week. No, I didn't. What? No, you said I had a week. I already gave you extra time. I need to pack up my stuff, like clothes and stuff. You have clothes there. I want to say goodbye. What, so your sisters can talk badly about me in front of you? No, they have already influenced you enough. I wasn't influenced by them, you're just being a fucking asshole. I'm fulfilling my obligation as a parent. The parent doesn't kidnap their own child from the rest of their family. No, but it's a parent's job to prevent bad influences from spreading to their kid. I loathe you. I gave up on talking to him. It wasn't worth the time and it wouldn't get me anywhere. I secretly pulled out the phone that I was given. Fortunately, I had the foresight to mute it. I texted my sisters a message so I could at least warn them of what was happening. I'm sorry, I won't be coming home tonight. He has kidnapped me when I tried to get to the buses, and I will be living at his place. I wish I could have said goodbye at least. Truthfully, this period of my adolescence is one I can only remember in fragments. When I try to think back on the next couple of years of my life after being stolen away, most of my memory is a complete blank slate. I remember bits and pieces here and there, and these small experiences are the only real stories I have regarding this part of my life. While I struggle to remember specific memories, I can still recall what I felt during that time. When I was adjusting to my new prison, I remember experiencing an overall dissociation from reality. Nothing felt real. I felt like I was stuck in a psychedelic nightmare that had no ending in sight. While I did get used to some of my step family after a while, they were initially not very welcoming, and any kind of sympathy or kindness they offered felt staged. My dad kept trying to justify his decision to exercise his rights of custody by reiterating his logic without providing anything new, and I remember even one time he printed out and gave me Mom's will. I glanced over it and immediately threw it away. I know for certain that wasn't my mom's writing. I mean, her writing wasn't so calculated and manipulative. I recognized the literary fingerprint of my dad, and his was all over what he called Mom's will. When I told him that it wasn't her writing, he explained it away by saying he summarized what she wrote. He didn't even try to deny that he wrote it. He had so little respect for my intelligence and autonomy as a person that he thought I would be satisfied with the summary of a will of one of the most important people in my life. School was difficult to adjust to. I was thrust into a completely new environment with nobody I knew. Many of the other kids also had completely different viewpoints that I simply couldn't understand or sympathize with because most of them grew up in upper middle class or just straight up rich families. It's not like I grew up in an impoverished home. I had some luxuries, but all my luxuries were also my siblings' luxuries. We had to share. My mom had to work her ass off to support her family, and all my siblings had to find ways to support themselves to take some of the burden off her when they became adults. When I listened to the other kids around me talk, I felt like my reality was on a completely different plane of existence. Baffled by how my peers around me thought about certain topics, but also people that were different from them. Many of the other thoughts and opinions reeked of either privilege or being too sheltered, and it freaked me out. The other kids did try to include me, but it felt disingenuous because I realized very quickly that they would rather spend time with the friends they already had because they already shared their values and they were easy to talk to for them. Still, I needed friends if I wanted school to get easier, so I mastered the art of having absolutely no opinion whatsoever. Whenever somebody would ask my thoughts on something, I would typically give a non-answer that wouldn't necessarily agree with anybody, but also not contradict anybody. I use this tactic frequently to scope out the moral compass of the people around me by luring them to speak their own thoughts on any given matter without extracting mine. If anybody gave an answer I could understand, or an answer that I could tell had a lot of thought put into it, I considered talking to them more and opening myself up just the tiniest bit to them. I did manage to find a couple of friends and acquaintances, but I was exhausted from school every day because I wasn't allowed to be myself. I had to mask my true self and create a false identity of a person with no thoughts or beliefs, a completely milquetoast, bland individual that everyone will talk to and welcome the presence of, but mostly because a person like that has no presence to intrude on somebody with. I was an actor at school and emotionally overwhelmed at my new home. I had no place to vent my emotions and nobody to talk to that would listen to me. Well, that's not completely true. I did have one saving grace. I still had the home phone from my mom's place. Whenever the house was quiet or empty, I would call my sister, just to have somebody to talk to, somebody that was on my side and supported me. My sister was the only person I could comfortably talk to, and the only person I felt safe enough to start sobbing to when another injustice was committed against me. She was the only one that knew my situation. Whenever I tried to open up to teachers or other kids at school, they gave me a look of disbelief. They all thought I was acting hysterical and unfairly portraying my dad as a villain. Or they tried to provide emotional support when I could tell they couldn't care less. When I tried to tell them what it felt like losing my mom and being forced to move so suddenly and unfairly, they didn't acknowledge my feelings. They tried to take objective viewpoints by ignoring my feelings and pointing out the facts of the situation. The rare times that a teacher or other grown-up would consider my viewpoints, they would then immediately talk about it with my dad for clarification. And when they were done talking to him, They would tell me the same thing as anybody else. My dad wasn't explicitly violent or crazy. He didn't have a belt and lash me like everybody would think when talking about mistreating children. He was cunning and manipulative with an impressive charisma that was only thwarted by his ego. My dad is able to provide arguments and logical reasoning for his actions. Everything he says always sounds plausible unless you are the victim of his actions. Unfortunately, no matter how disillusioned the victim is, it doesn't really matter if everybody that could help is more willing to believe in a person with the more developed charismatic approach that spouts lies more easily than truths. With that phone and just having some small emotional reprieve from my life, I was able to keep pushing. I still had a hope that if I just persisted, I would be able to have a better life at the end of the tunnel. I had a goal, I had something to fight for, and I wasn't going to lie down and take it. I wouldn't let my dad win. I couldn't. Every day, I knew my situation was miserable, and I felt miserable, but I also knew that I was making progress towards having some kind of small happiness, even if it felt like nothing in the grand scheme of things. With my sister as my sole cheerleader, I felt like I could survive anything. Then one day, I came back from school, emotionally distressed about something, and I wanted to call my sister. I searched around my room and for the home phone, and I forgot to take it with me that day. I searched and searched. Did I misplace it? I frantically checked around every corner until I remembered where I placed it. I checked again, and there was nothing. The phone was gone. What? No. Did he take it? He not only physically isolated me, but he also socially isolated me? I stamped down to my dad's office and burst open the door. "Where did you put the phone?" I yelled, desperate for my only source of communication back. "It's not like it was your phone," my dad immediately retorted. "It was given to me by my sister. Where is it?" "I hid it. You've been uncooperative with me lately, and now I know it's because you have been calling your siblings." "Give it back!" "No, why should I? Shouldn't any caring parent let their child interact with their family? It's exactly that I care about you, that I'm protecting you from bad influence." "You don't care about me." "Yes, I do." "No, you don't." "I won't let you have that phone back, but is there anything I can do to help? Anything I can do to make you feel more welcome, happier?" "If you want to make me happy, then why don't you just kill me? If you truly cared about me, you would have just ended it by now. I had friends and family up there that I felt that I left. I'm stuck here and have no way to talk to them. I hate talking to all the kids at school, and none of my stepbrothers care about me. Everybody hates me, and if I'd known my life would be like this, I wish I was never born." "I would never kill you. Your brothers here care about you." "None of them have ever tried to speak with me." "Is there anything I can do?" "Can you give me the phone back?" "No." Once my dad said that, I knew I couldn't get my only lifeline back. My only source of communication, my only support in this fucked up situation. Gone. I slinked out of the office and dragged my feet up to the stairs. My misery dropped down to pure nihilism. My head was a typhoon of half-formulated thoughts that all ended up being more reasons to hate myself. Why me? Why did Mom have to die? Why was I the only one taken away? What was the point of living? Why aren't my siblings trying to get me back? Why does nobody believe me? Why does everybody hate me? Am I the one in the wrong? Am I the asshole? It was my fault Mom died. I wasn't there for her final moments. I wish I could have helped her. I wish I could have talked to her one last time. I wish I could have seen her face and burned it into my memory. Can't even visualize what she looks like. Did I even truly love her? Am I capable of loving anybody? Does anybody want me alive? Am I just here for my dad to use me? My dad just vicariously living the life he wishes he had through me? Would anybody even care if I died? Would my siblings cry if they knew? Would they even hear the news of my death? Would my dad get away scot-free if I killed myself in his home? Is it wrong of me to want vengeance against him? Am I even a functional human being? No, I'm broken. I'm unfixable. If I survive, I'll just become a monster. I don't want to be like my dad. I hate myself. I want to die. 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 Kill me. Kill me. Just kill me already. The knife glistened in the dim light of the midnight kitchen. Which part should I cut for the least painful death? The throat or the wrist? Well, I would undeniably bleed out if I cut the wrist, so that's a no-go. But I also heard that if you slit your throat, you asphyxiate and choke on your own blood, which is also pretty miserable. Wait, isn't the stomach the best option? Oh, geez, I don't know. Maybe I should just go the classic route and stab my heart. Well, I guess I'll just choose one. I always hated multiple choice questions. I raised the knife and pointed it towards my chest. I slowly assessed the angle and tested it, assuring I would hit the mark once I plunged the knife in. What if it was painful? Well, no, of course it would be, but this pain is only temporary compared to everything else. I'll go from 10. 10. 9. 8. 7. 6. 5. 4. 3. Dominic, what are you doing? My stepmom's voice broke through from the other side of the dining room. I quickly clamored to shove the knife back in its spot. Nothing. Just go to bed already. You have to wake up early for school tomorrow. My stepmom left and went back to her room. What the fuck was she doing wandering the house so late? I glanced back at the knife. I wasn't in the mood to try anymore. What was I even trying to do? I stared at my own hands in disbelief. Was I really about to kill myself? I decided to go to bed. I could only conjure up that kind of judgment lapse once, and I lost it for the night. Well, I guess I always had that as a backup plan if things got worse later on. Summer of 2017. This is where my memory goes from being fragments to being a continuous timeline. And there is a good reason for this, too. For the first 2 years of being stuck with my dad, I became numb to the anguish and emotional manipulation. I gave up on trying to fight back because every time I rebelled, I would get gaslit into thinking I was the bad guy from my own dad. I gave up on living a complete life at this point. I figured that by the time I became an adult, I would commit suicide because my dad never tried to teach me any adulting skills. I figured I would either implode and be a socially anxious hermit that would never go outside or become homeless. And I'd rather not deal with the consequences of either. But still, I was cooperating with my dad in his scheme to try to brainwash me into liking the prison I was stuck in. One day, we were having a conversation about plans for the week, and he mentioned that Mother's Day was coming up. I was supposed to do something with my stepfamily, but I was repulsed by the very thought of showing appreciation to somebody who'd never tried to be my mother, who I never wanted to accept as my mom. I suggested something else. For Mother's Day, can I go and see my siblings? I feel like Mom would want us to be together again. It took a great amount of courage to ask that. I felt like the worst person alive for using my own mom's death to try and leverage any opportunity to see my family. But if my dad truly cared or even pretended to care, approaching with a guilt trip would work. Wait, use a guilt trip? Why am I thinking of it like that? Exploiting emotions like that is something my dad would do, and I wanted to be nothing like him. Still, anything for a chance to see people I care about. I'll talk to your siblings about it, my dad responded. Before I knew it, during the weekend, I was in the car, riding up to my sister's place for the first time in 2 years. 2 years? I wonder how much everybody has changed. I especially wanted to see my nieces and nephews. They were younger than me, so 2 years must have meant they grew a lot. When we got there, my dad dropped me off and left. I only had a few hours with them before he would pick me up again, but I was finally able to see my family again. I excitedly burst through the door, and I was met with everybody's cheerful greetings. We all caught up on everything going on with our lives. I talked to my sisters and brothers. I saw my nieces and nephews. I felt like I was surrounded by family again. I was smiling, playing games with them, eating food, but I felt like something was off. My siblings weren't really involving me in any of the conversations. They were just complaining about their own lives to each other, and I just happened to be there with them this time. I I felt betrayed. I didn't expect the attention on me at all times, but this was the first time in 2 years, and it felt too normal, too typical, too lonely. When my dad came back to pick me up, of course I was sad to leave them again, but at the same time, I didn't know what to think anymore. It felt like I was unimportant to them, and that's when I realized it. They had all already moved on. Instead of actively trying to fight for my return or communicate with me, they had all moved on with their lives and continued as if I had never existed, just like they did with mom. To them, me being stuck with dad was basically the same as another person having died. I was angry, furious, but I also held back because I knew that it was reasonable to expect people to focus on their own lives when they couldn't help someone else. Everybody else had progressed 2 years in their own lives, and I was still stuck living a long nightmare I'd been trapped in since I was 13. My sole motivation for persisting those 2 years was because I knew dying would make my siblings unhappy. But they treated the gathering like I had already died anyway. I felt depressed afterwards, and I was just satisfied to shelve those thoughts and get back to playing Zelda when I was done with the visit. During the next several months, I fell into a slump. I wasn't quite sure why I was still alive. When I lost the only thing I was persisting for, it just felt futile. I was alive, yeah, I was breathing, but I felt dead on the inside when I was just going through the motions of trying my best to not anger anybody in my home. I decided to at least focus on future proofing my life when I did eventually escape the situation I was in. Specifically, I focused on driver's ed. Now, I don't know what the typical driver's ed class is like, but mine was online and it could I could take it at my own pace, sure, kind of. I could take classes whenever I wanted, but I could only do 2 hours a day before the website blocked me for the next 24 hours. I only had 6 months to complete the course. The class was about 30 to 40 hours total, so when I saw the deadline for the class coming up in a month, and I hadn't started it yet, I forced myself to work on it every day since I couldn't marathon through it in the last week. One of those days I had to work on that class fell on my birthday. I was okay with working on my birthday because, after all, it is my birthday. I should have the right to decide what I do with it. Apparently, my dad and stepmom had a different idea. I was working on a test in the class. I sat down and started it, knowing it would only take about 20 minutes, since, all of it was multiple choice. When I was halfway through the test, my dad told me that the cake was ready and he wanted me to be there. I wasn't told anything about a birthday celebration, and I quite frankly didn't even think one was going to be held for me with how I was largely treated within the household. The problem is that I had already started the test, and I was halfway through it and unable to put a pause on it. I mean, it would only take 10 minutes to complete, but I still had to finish it in one go, or else my time budgeting would be completely thrown off, and I would probably not finish the class on time. I told my dad that I was in the middle of a test and I couldn't stop. I needed 10 more minutes. I would be there for the celebration. Instead of my dad and stepmom being reasonable enough to wait only 10 minutes for me to finish my test on my own birthday, they ate the cake they made for me, throwing out the uneaten slices, and they also threw out all the gifts that they had prepared for me. When they did that, they then came over and started yelling at me about how ungrateful of a child I was, not appreciating the time that everyone had set aside to celebrate my birthday. I was so flabbergasted that I didn't even know how to respond. What kind of absolutely distorted logic does one need to blame the birthday person for ruining their own birthday celebration that they were not even being told was happening by spending time on a task they needed to finish that day? It wasn't even a long errand or anything. It was just a test that would take another 10 minutes to finish. I was legitimately shocked into silence, forcing my brain to select the right answers to the questions while my dad and stepmom were screaming at me. They, they took my silence as an expression of rebellion, and the argument they made up spiraled so far out of control that they vowed to never celebrate my birthday again. They did keep their word. My birthday was never celebrated in the years after. I was okay with not having birthday celebrations. I mean, having your birthday celebrated by your captors wasn't exactly a good feeling. But still, I knew that my dad did have a shred of generosity enough to give me Metroid Samus Returns as a gift, since I was getting very heavily into the Metroid series at that time, specifically the 2D games. I don't like the Prime games. But when they stormed out of the room and left the house to avoid me and my terrible attitude, my youngest stepbrother walked up to me and when I was done with the test. I saved this for you before they threw it out. He gave me a perfect square I recognized to distinctly be a 3DS game case with the wrapping on it. I opened it up and it was Samus Returns. I was relieved. Thank you. No worries. I don't know why they got mad at you for that. I mean, it's your birthday. I smirked a little bit after he said that. It was nice to know that there was someone on this side that could muster even just a little bit of genuine sympathy for me. I still felt terrible after that, and I cried at school the next day due to, well, what happened the day before. And some of my friends were there to witness that. But even still, it was nice to know that it wasn't all completely hopeless. Around this time of my life, two very important things happened to me. The first of which happened in gym class. To give a bit of context for this, I was an extremely socially anxious person. I hated doing anything in public spaces. One big example is that I never ate lunch at school because I was afraid people would judge me for what I ate or how I ate any food. So I would simply power through the day instead of eating anything. Another situation that gave me even more anxiety was going to the men's locker room and changing. Growing up, I had a few friends and people I knew that picked on my body figure. I was overweight and people called me fat. I knew I was overweight, but when I have exercise induced asthma and I was a picky eater, it was really difficult to lose any of that weight. I really didn't want to go to the locker room and be called fat by a bunch of guys surrounding me that were all probably on the football team. So instead of going in the locker room, I would simply have my gym clothes already worn for the day. And if possible, I would try to implement a PE class that was at the end of the day into my schedule so I could go home and immediately shower. In my PE class, the teacher wanted anybody that came to the gym early before class to start walking laps around the gym. I obliged. Walking never hurt anybody, and I could at least do that much. But it also meant that I was just basically walking around in an empty gymnasium for 10 minutes before the class started. Sometimes the gym itself was still dark because the teacher hadn't turned the lights on yet, and I was still walking around the gym even in the pitch darkness. Hey, I mean, I was told to walk before class, so I would walk. But I bet that it certainly did give off a strange energy to any onlookers that noticed me. And that's exactly what my soon to be friend thought when he saw me walking around the gym in the dark. According to him, he was always the fastest one to change in the locker room, and when he arrived to class, he would always wonder how I got there before him when he never saw me in the locker room. One time, he saw me walking in the dark gym, and when the light suddenly turned on, he came up with such a stupid inside joke that we still sometimes reference to this day. Hey Dominic, I see you're powering the city. A random kid in my grade came up to me and started walking next to me. Uh, yeah. I played along. The only thought on my mind was a simple question. Who in the world is this eccentric jock, and why was he suddenly talking to me? Was he trying to get me to join the football team for my large stature? I was used to everybody in the school recognizing me. I won a Dance Dance Revolution tournament on stage in front of the whole school in 7th grade. I was also fairly tall compared to everybody else. I mean, I would later learn that I was referred to as one of the grade's kaiju among the students my age. Still, this joke of powering the city would become a routine in gym class, and we would eventually start talking a little bit more outside of class. And I was eventually invited into his friend group. Some of the people within that group I already knew and had mutual friends with. In any case, most of the people within that group were interesting people because they all had at least one similar interest as me, and even if not directly, there was always somebody that could understand both of them and connect the pieces for them. I was just observing, and I enjoyed the discussion most of the time. It just felt nice to be included in a group and not immediately be pressured to say something or do anything because I was there. I could just observe, and people would appreciate my presence the rare times I did chip in. I finally found a group of people I could be with, and it felt like my isolated prison had expanded beyond a claustrophobic cell. I felt like I had a little room to finally be myself with the people around me. I said two important things happened to me. The first one was getting new friends, but what was the second? Well, this was in 2017. A pretty big year for gaming with the release of the Switch. One specific game came out that not only gave me enjoyment, but also helped motivate me to change my life. It wasn't Mario Odyssey, Zelda, or Splatoon, or anything like that. My favorite game from that year was the one, the only, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And some of you may roll your eyes and ask, like, what? Why Xenoblade Chronicles 2? That game is extremely flawed with over-sexualized character designs, terrible voice acting, a plot worse than the first game, and an overly complicated battle system with several translation errors in the text that don't properly explain or even misinforms about mechanics and items. And to you I say, yes, Xenoblade 2 is all of those things. I cannot and will not defend the flaws of Xenoblade 2, because I know they exist and it is still one of my favorite games of all time despite all the glaring flaws it has. It is impossible to explain why I love the game so much to anybody who has not played it. Quite simply, I was infatuated with it. After playing the prologue, I noticed all the questionable voice acting, I noticed the weird fairy tale-esque over-sexualization within an otherwise campy hero's journey story, and I struggled with the battle system during my first playthrough, but despite it all, I couldn't help but be drawn in. The game so brazenly presented itself confidently, and personality exuded from every single cutscene, music track, and botched scream from Rex's voice actor. I started out ironically loving the game, yes, but then I started to unironically get invested into the game. Specifically all the characters, not just because I was rooting for them in-game, but also because I could tell the voice acting in the second half of the game got noticeably better. And with the characters' portrayal too. It was like an artist getting better at drawing after practice. When I got to the end of the game, I legitimately cried at the ending, as I felt like the message of the game was speaking directly to me, trying to cheer me on. I saw myself in Pyra and Mithra's characters. Pyra was the personality I constructed after living with my dad for 2 years. The boring, people-pleasing person I became in fear of ever offending others around me. Mithra was my true personality, caged deep within the recesses of my being, begging to be let out and express myself for who I am. My preferred one over the other. I mean, Mithra, obviously. But the game helped me see myself for who I am. I wasn't a broken person for having a different front-facing personality than my internal one. Both my external personality and my internal personality were expressions of me. The problem wasn't that I had an external personality, but rather I didn't know how to bring the internal personality up more often. Late in the game, it was revealed that the whole purpose of Pyra and Mithra's journey to the World Tree wasn't to help Rex save the world. Her whole purpose for the adventure was to ask her creator to kill her and end her suffering. Pyra was created for the sole purpose of bearing Mithra's guilt, and many of her personality traits are polar opposites to Mithra because Mithra hated all those traits of hers, and Pyra is supposed to be an ideal self for Mithra to achieve, but cannot because she was too scared to face the world after a tragic event that happened before the main events of the main game. Of course, Pyra and Mithra live at the end, but that's because throughout the events of the game, they had obtained the courage to slowly use their powers and accept themselves and their past mistakes. When I beat that game, I felt a flutter in my chest, an excitement that I all but forgot. I felt happy for the first time in years. I had hope for the future. It didn't matter if my siblings gave up on me or not. What truly mattered was if I gave up on myself. After beating that game, I vowed to myself that I would keep on persevering. No, not just that. I would try to be greedier and fight for my own happiness, even if my dad and stepfamily would hate me for it. I wouldn't compromise on my integrity just so I could please people that never cared about me in the first place. I refused to stoop so low. I had to fight my own war. I may have acquired a newfound drive to keep living, but my life didn't really get a whole lot easier. I simply was operating on the fleeting assumption that maybe I would get rewarded for surviving. I wasn't naive enough to think that just because I could survive, that life would actually reward me for it. But honestly, after the couple years beforehand, anything would be better than the situation I was stuck in. I was still extremely depressed, and I very frequently questioned whether I should keep my promise to myself to keep living. I always ended up concluding yes, but I struggled to find any reason for me to live. Every one of my friends was worried about what they were doing for the future, what college they wanted to go to, what degree to pursue, what job to get, and if they wanted to get married and have kids. Whenever I thought about that stuff, I completely drew a blank every time. I had no plans on finding a girlfriend because I didn't want to get anybody involved in my personal difficulties. But even beyond the immediate jealousy of my peers for dating people, I had no idea what I wanted to do for college or what job I wanted to get. It's not that I just didn't know, I didn't even have any thoughts regarding the future. I quite literally couldn't fathom the idea of me surviving past high school to go to college and get a job. I lost all prospects of any kind of future. I may have been striving to live and do the best for myself, but the only thing I knew how to do was survive a shitty situation. I didn't know how to actually turn it around, and I didn't know what I wanted to achieve in life because I never anticipated that I would stay alive for so long. My grades dropped from being mostly A's in most of my assignments to being B's with some A's, with the occasional C or D thrown in there sometimes. When I took the ACT, I only got a slightly above average score instead of a moderately above average score like I would have gotten if I found motivation. Yeah, I know, describing this as a humble brag on my part, but it was also a curse. Since my grades were still pretty decent overall despite my own futurelessness, nobody noticed that something might have been going on with me. My grades were a silent call for help from my part, and certainly some of the teachers did notice I didn't have the best grades in some of their classes, but nobody thought to ask or even considered that instead of just having a bad day, I was having a bad time in general. Although, even if they did ask, I wouldn't have spilled anything. I was too scared of being betrayed by anybody. I mean, I didn't want to hear anybody else downplay my own problems or try to convince me that I was the problem for my own misfortune. I knew that something was wrong with me. I felt detached from the world, and not exactly in a dissociative sense, like I was trying to reject reality, but I really just didn't care. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about myself. didn't really care about anything. I couldn't bring myself to care. I wanted to do something to address my apathy about everything, and I did really want to go to a therapist, but I just couldn't. My dad would be willing to take me to a therapist, sure, but I didn't want to bring it up because the one time I did go to therapy after mom died, the therapist thought I was being a spoiled brat for being infuriated at my phone being stolen away, and that I was just rebelling against my dad. Needless to say, I didn't go to therapy again after that. So, instead of going to therapy, I decided to become my own therapist by taking an AP psychology class in junior year. I mean, nothing has ever gone wrong with people self diagnosing before, right? I actually legitimately loved my psychology class. Yeah, the teacher was a bit uncanny, but I loved the information in the class. I always found the secrets of the mind to be a fascinating topic, and with learning about the different approaches to psychology, the different theories of the mind, and the different experiments conducted on the mind over the years, I found a new interest that I wanted to explore. Learning about the brain and psychological phenomena that occur was really interesting, but just as much as I had an interest in it, I felt more scared the more I learned about it. Specifically, the nature versus nurture conversation prominent in how people obtain personalities. For those of you unfamiliar with the psychological concept of nature v nurture, let me briefly describe it. Essentially, in the world of psychology, there are two broad things that can influence who you are and who you will become in the future. The first is the nurture part, which essentially just refers to the environment you're in, who you surround yourself with, the type of culture you grow up in, the media you consume, how much money you have. This makes sense because everybody adapts their behavior to their environment, not necessarily because people want to change to the environment per se, but because the environment somebody is in can and will eventually mold somebody to fit it as best as they can. The second part of this idea, nature, refers quite literally to genetics. What genes did you inherit from your parents? Do your parents or family members have a history of drinking, smoking, gambling? Does your family have a history of male pattern baldness? And what about cancer or Alzheimer's? In my case, my family has a pattern of having aphantasia, completely non visual imagination, but that's a topic to shelve for another day. When discussing the idea of nature v nurture in psychology, much of the evidence for the nature side of things revolves around identical twin studies. Many of these studies involve identical twins that were separated at birth for whatever reason, but the people involved in the study found both of them and studied them over the course of their lives. Many of the twin studies were fascinating, as even though both the twins grew up in completely different environments, many of them had similar interests or had occupations that utilized similar sets of skills. They even sometimes had identical nervous tics. Learning of these studies and how much genetics could actually influence your personality. I mean, even if we weren't aware of it, how it fully worked, it just scared me. Would I become just like my dad later on in life? Would my become a bad parent gene somehow activate later in life and entice me to have children just to emotionally torture them later on? My environment was already shit, and half of my genetics I didn't even want to inherit. I felt like I was doomed to become a bad person later on in life. No, not just that. I already felt like a terrible person. Knowing more about psychology only made me more self conscious of my own behavior. I was already socially anxious, but now, whenever I did something in a social interaction that felt off, I would then mentally ask myself, why did I do that? I would become scared that every little bit of space I took was the result of me inevitably turning into the type of person my dad is. As a result, I tried to squash every single slight trait I had that resembled my dad. I became too nice, and people started using my trained patience to exploit me and take advantage of what I had, or they failed to help me with something whenever I asked. Something I still struggle with today. I refuse to manipulate people, like, at all. Most conversations involve some give and take, and in a more literal way, the participants of a conversation are manipulating each other to get the other to say or discuss something that they would prefer to be talked about. I refuse to sway any conversation too much because I felt like I was using people whenever I did that. So, yeah, instead of doing that, I simply often listened to people and only contributed to the conversation when I absolutely had to. And the paranoia of my psychology only worsened with each psychology class I took. While I knew better than to self diagnose with anything, I couldn't help but at least see some shred of myself in the studies of people that my classes deemed an abnormal psychological phenomena. Was I wrong for being able to sympathize with the abnormal? Was I an abnormal specimen to study? I know I wasn't normal or average by any means, but would I have to hide my atypical nature my whole life and just pass as an average person to continue living a life? It took me several years to realize this on my own, so let me just save you the time it took me. The truth is, no, it doesn't matter. Psychology is a very helpful tool to apply vocabulary that helps provide understanding to how and why people behave the way they do, but it is not the end all be all for determining what a person is like. Half the field of psychology is founded upon complete bullshit created by people throughout history that had their own philosophies and subjective viewpoints on how the human mind works. Unlike other sciences like chemistry or physics, where there are concrete rules and laws that cannot be disproven, there aren't really any concrete laws for anything in psychology. Or, I guess to put it in layman's terms, psychology is a vibes based science. Yes, there is the DSM 5 and several experiments to lay the groundwork for how the human mind works. But all those experiments only provide controlled scenarios to possibly diagnose people under. And the DSM 5, if taken literally, would allow you to diagnose literally anybody and everybody with some sort of mental disorder. I learned this when I took an abnormal psychology class in college, and just that kind of labeling was being done for exam. We had to take examples of people acting like how people would in extreme circumstances and suggest, not diagnose, suggest that they may or may not have certain mental disorders or other abnormal psychological interactions with their environments. Needless to say, I have a complicated relationship with the field of psychology. My motivation to keep hanging out with my friends and my interest in some of my classes kept me cruising throughout high school until I finished it. I didn't have spectacular grades, but for having no motivation in life whatsoever and being depressed 24/7, slightly above average is still quite impressive. And it's not like my future of attending college was completely ruined. I just wouldn't be getting any crazy scholarships for any colleges I enrolled in. Still, when senior year started, I was feeling an extreme amount of pressure to find a college to apply for. Just any college that would get me out of the house. The problem with that being is I was extremely scared of living independently. I had practically no adulting skills whatsoever. I never was given an opportunity to learn them. I don't know skills like cooking, cleaning, driving, and the one that scared me the most was socializing. If I lived on my own, I could eat snacks and make simple meals, but when I ran out, I would have to go to the grocery store. If I had to go to the store, I would have to interact with people, the cashier at the very least. What if the cashier judged me for getting frozen pizzas, Cheetos, and Oreos? What would they think? What would the other people think? What if people figured out that I was a picky eater and judged me for that? That's not to mention that I would have to get a job too, which was even more scary than going to a grocery store because of the whole application process that I didn't really know how to approach, and the fact that I would be working with complete strangers. I was already halfway through my senior year and I was starting to panic. If only there was something that could help me stall for a reason to not go to college right away. I wasn't ready for the adult world. I didn't know how to be independent. I was scared of learning all these adulting skills. I didn't want to become an adult because getting a job sounds miserable, and I didn't want to become more depressed than I am. I just wanted to play video games and escape from reality. I was too intimidated by my surroundings. I wish there was some kind of miraculous reason 2020 could give me not to go to college. Well, I guess I'll binge watch the entirety of One Piece now that there's a global pandemic. Ironically enough, the pandemic actually changed my life for the better. I got a taste of the panic that comes from being unprepared for the adult world, so the extra year the pandemic bought me really allowed me to use my time more intentionally. Like, first of all, I started this YouTube channel in 2020. Okay, everybody who was going stir crazy probably started making videos of some sort, but for me, it was truly a special moment. Instead of talking myself down from making videos because I was too embarrassed to put myself out there and present myself on the same platform as some of my personal idols, I actually went ahead and uploaded a video, then another one, and another, and another. And before I knew it, I finished my very first Let's Play, Super Mario Galaxy. I didn't know jack shit about providing commentary, and I didn't know how to do any editing. Not like I really learned anything about those in between now and then. But still, I put myself out there, and even if nobody really commented or liked my videos, I was just proud of myself and happy for doing something I wanted to do for a long time. For me, my LPs are a personal catalog of games that I recorded, each one adding to an archive of my own thoughts and opinions on the games, sure, but also bookmarks my own personal life. In each LP I record, I am in a different circumstance, and my beliefs and thoughts do actually change from one LP to another, and it's interesting to watch myself grow and change as a person over the course of my LPs. There's a reason why my banner is a collage of the games I played. It's not to advertise how much content I have on my channel, it's for me to watch and accumulate just how much stuff I have done with my channel. Still, I didn't have a whole lot to do during the pandemic besides play video games or record myself playing video games. I am pretty self sustainable in social isolation, but even I was starting to get lonely. Just when I was thinking about how I wished to see my friends, an old face decided to call me. My phone rang, startling me. Thinking it was just another spam call, I hovered over the decline button until I saw my friend's name written on it. Wait, a friend of mine was reaching out to me? Calling me, even? And not even one of my older middle school friends. It was that one guy I met in gym class? I grabbed the phone and answered. Hi, what's going on? I answered. Maybe he was calling for an emergency or something. I don't know. I don't know why anybody would call me otherwise. Yo, want a lift? What? You want a lift? I guess. I hesitantly agreed. I wasn't particularly fond of exercise, but I was also desperate for a social outlet. Cool, I'll pick you up. Where do you live? I told him my address, and about 20 minutes later, I saw a car drive up, and my friend was waiting to pick me up. I didn't know how much I would enjoy lifting, but at least it would get me out of the house. I remember feeling pretty awkward during that first hangout. I didn't think any of my friends have actually asked me to hang out with them before then. And it wasn't a fault on their part, I just never made it clear that I wanted to be invited to places. So, actually going to a friend's house to lift? It felt surreal. During that first session, that friend also told me to make a Discord account and join the servers he was in. I created my account and joined the server and noticed a ton of profiles I didn't recognize but assumed were my friends or mutual acquaintances, just casually hanging out in a voice chat and watching anime together. I didn't join, but it was reassuring to know my friends were still alive and that they recognized me still and didn't feel annoyed by my presence on the server. Me hanging out with my friend to lift in his garage became a bit of a routine. Whenever my friend was free, he would come and pick me up from my home, and we would just lift weights to kill time. My friend taught me the basic form on all the lifts, dug into research on why and how certain lifts work and what muscle groups they exercise. And I understood basically none of it, but was still very interested in nonetheless. It was like having my own personal trainer teaching me all this stuff I never bothered to research because it was too much effort and way too confusing. Fittingly enough, this friend of mine did actually just recently become a certified personal trainer with dozens of clients, and he still helps me make my workout routines, and we occasionally lift together to this day. But still, that's beside the point. What I was trying to say is that it felt nice having somebody genuinely care about and go out of their way to invite me. And I surprisingly enjoyed the lifting despite my natural aversion to anything physical exercise. The neat thing with lifting is that it didn't really trigger my asthma because all the sets were short enough where I didn't have to worry about maintaining my breathing for long enough before the next sprint. I could actually do the exercise expected of me without fizzling out partway through and being exhausted for the rest of the experience. I mean, I still felt exhausted at the end of the workout sessions, but a physical exhaustion from being sore, not an I feel like I'm actively dying from lack of oxygen type of exhaustion. For the first time in my life, I could understand the jocks at school. I now felt the high that they got after getting a 315-pound PR on a deadlift. I could actually notice some progress with my own body. Not only feeling healthier, but also looking just that little bit more muscular. I now understood that I wasn't fat fully due to my own neglect to my health, but also that my metabolism is just extremely slow compared to the average person, making it really easy for me to gain weight and muscle, but also extremely difficult to burn it. I was able to give myself the benefit of doubt regarding my own weight. I was able to forgive myself for being larger than the average person, and I now understood how I could work on it without putting my health at risk. I felt a faint bubbling deep within my chest, an excitement, a sense of pride I forgot I could feel. Was I feeling confident? I wanted to keep this feeling, and so I adamantly kept hanging out with my friend to lift, trying new exercises, and fully getting into a 4-day workout routine that would go in cycles of upper body day, core day, leg day, and then the infamous hell day at the end of the week, where we would do exercises for all the main regions, and the exercises he incorporated were, in his words, personally designed to kill me. I was beyond the point of just casually lifting. My friend noticed. One day I remember him asking me something. Do you have any goals for your own body? Like, how so? Do you want to be muscular or do you want to lose all that fat? I just want to be healthy. I gave a non answer and my friend smirked. Okay, Dom, anything else? Uh, no, not really. I guess I just want to be comically strong for how fat I am. I replied, not really knowing how to answer. While I always felt a sense of disappointment when I looked at my own body in the mirror, I never really thought about what I wanted to do with it. It was only when my friend asked that I legitimately started realizing that I could actually change how my body looks, and I wasn't stuck with that same body image I had of myself for the past several years. Anything was possible, and my small but noticeable results from lifting were the proof of that. When we were lifting, that friend also bounced around an idea he had of creating a One Piece themed tabletop RPG campaign. He said the campaign was a lost cause because nobody would be able to show up to physical sessions now that the pandemic was occurring and we all graduated from high school and were going to be going to college soon. I convinced him otherwise. I told him that maybe the prospect of physical sessions were a lost cause, but it was still possible to do online sessions, and with the Discord music bots, it would have been possible to create really cool moods and moments with them that would otherwise be awkward or impossible in physical sessions. He thought about it and caved in to get session 0 started. And when session 1 started, all of us were invested, and the campaign is actually still going on to this day. I remember being so hyped for the campaign and having a lot of time to kill where I just watched the entirety of One Piece to gather the context for the world. When the campaign started, I actually struggled to get invested into my character at first. So, to help me get invested, I started writing journal entries from her perspective of navigator and straight man in a completely unhinged, crazy pirate crew. It started out as a fun creative exercise, but that exercise turned from something I did to pass time to becoming actual full length journals on a campaign in an imaginary alternate One Piece world from the perspective of a fictional character I am still playing to this day. I dread the day when she dies in the game because I've gotten so attached to her over the past 5 years. But I'm not ultimately worried because I know that day will never happen. I'm not letting my daughter die on me like that. Still, beyond just the notorious One Piece campaign, there were other campaigns I was part of within that same friend group. I briefly played in a Cyberpunk 2020 campaign before bowing out because I struggled with developing my character. There was a Starfinder campaign I was in briefly where I played a diplomatic robot who failed upwards and only knew how to phrase things in the worst possible ways despite being an actual diplomat for their own race. My favorite character I played ever was named Jester, which is not a Critical Role reference. He was a gender fluid character that would utilize people's preconceived perceptions of her and twist them around to make everybody that commented on him look like an absolute buffoon for even attempting to judge her. She also wanted to become a cult leader for the trickster god Yermo and become an idol of worship. My character was so mischievous and our party was so shaky at the start that I naturally ended up breaking apart the party and killing the campaign at the end of session 1 because of the infighting caused by people arguing about what to do with the homeless jester. When the session was done, everybody either said they loved or hated Jester, which is the exact type of character I was going for. A divisive one that would keep people on their toes but also be entertaining, as the name implies. Through my characters, I was able to play a different role than I normally did. Instead of being the chronically socially anxious person I was in real life, I could at least play the role of somebody more confident, and that confidence would at least partially carry over into my real life. My characters are made up, yes, but they also emphasize certain characteristics of my personality I normally didn't express. Parts of myself I was too scared to showcase without the front of a tabletop campaign. My characters didn't solely fix my social anxiety. I still am very nervous today. However, my characters did provide that first step for me to eventually learn how to break out of my shell. Being able to talk to my friends physically and digitally allowed me to confront a different reality than the one I was stuck in. I could be in an environment that supported me instead of sabotaging me at every second. I learned how to be optimistic again for the future instead of living purely out of spite. I had hopes that maybe my channel would someday blow up to thousands of subscribers one day. I dreamed of finding a job that I could find and enjoy, like voice acting. I was working towards a reality where I could control my own environment for once and myself to become the expressive, charming, witty, kind person I always wanted to be. I may not have been that person in that moment, and I may not fully be that person now, but I was making steps towards that. And for the first time ever, I was able to say that I could love myself. Self love isn't a switch that you can just flip on and suddenly experience. Not in my experience. I may make it seem like that and romanticize it for the sake of the script, but even when I found those brief moments of appreciation for myself, I still largely disliked myself. I always judged myself and I had impossible standards for myself to become a perfect human being. When I first started living with my dad, that was all I had. My negative thoughts cycling downwards to the point of attempted suicide, and even further down to the point where I had no energy, motivation, or determination to plunge the knife into my heart and end it all. I still had those negative thoughts even during all this, but instead of being stuck in that endless loop, I would feel a spark of optimism that would take a critical look at my catastrophizing thoughts, debunk them, and give me a hand to hold on to before I tumbled down the well of self hate even further. It's not like I was climbing up the well per se. I was dangling at the halfway point, being suspended by a golden thread that refused to snap. It wasn't until my first year of college that I was actually able to make some progress upwards. After taking a practically forced gap year due to the pandemic, I went to college. With my aimlessness, it wasn't my idea. I simply followed my dad's instructions and applied to the same private college my brother and sister went to. The college accepted me for my grades and for my legacy. Being a brother of some of their more famous students, the college and teachers like to tout around as having taught and fostered their skills. I was scared of college. I was going to be living with a complete stranger as a roommate, and I didn't even know how to interact with other people when I wasn't living them, much less living with somebody I didn't know the first thing about. When I was dropped off at the dorm on the first day, I went to the freshman tour. I was socializing, sure, but I wasn't doing it because I was genuinely interested in people. It was a survival instinct I was following to try and establish myself with some people so I wouldn't be left with absolutely no social life later on in my college years. When the end of the day reached and I was in my dorm, I realized something. My roommate never showed up. Did I not have a roommate? Was I alone? Well, I guess that was one relief, a sense of privacy. Still, even with that one small silver lining, I couldn't go to sleep. I cried and my breathing escalated. I was having a panic attack in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. I tried calling somebody to calm me down, but nobody I knew was awake. So I had to force myself to breathe, and I eventually got too tired to worry about anything anymore to keep me awake. Despite my initial first night, I did warm up to college, and it wasn't quite nearly as terrifying as I thought it would be. I met a lot of students that were really fun to hang out around. I mean, now that I was in the city, I was in an area with a lot more diverse opinions and people. So it was easier for me to find people I could just click with and had a natural chemistry with. I joined the drama club to give me something to do because I was always fond of the idea of acting, but just never had the social nerve to do it. I still have stage fright to this day, but with repeated exposure to the stage, I've learned to harness my nervousness towards putting on a good performance. A lot of the drama kids were also really fun to hang out with. And here's a secret for all of you that are still in school and are thinking about a drama club. Yes, half the drama kids are really unique characters, but many of them are fun to hang out with. And guess what? All of the cool drama kids are actually just closeted D&D nerds. Even if I wasn't that great of an actor, the other cast members enjoyed my presence, and oddly enough, in a cast full of extroverts, my introvertedness was appreciated in a way that people could latch onto and like about my personality. It was actually surreal. I was already used to listening to other people and holding my thoughts, but when I was the only person in a group that didn't have an ego that wanted to be on stage, I just kind of became the designated person to talk and hang out with that everybody enjoyed when weren't getting along with each other. Me? I just enjoyed hearing about the drama, for lack of a better word. When I did talk about myself and my stage fright and my reasons for joining, many of them were able to sympathize. They were rooting for my success, and that felt even more surreal. It felt good, I just wasn't used to such positivity. I was even invited to a personal post-production party that the D&D lovers were hosting after the show that some people in the club were allowed to join. There were only about 12 people or so, but I was actually at a college party, which I never would have thought my social life would be good enough to do so. Everybody was drinking. I mean, I had one drink, but not enough to get drunk, and everyone was having a good time. I specifically remember the host of the party getting really drunk after only a few shots of Pink Whitney, and he came up to me idling against the wall and started shouting, "Dominic, you are one of the kindest, coolest people I have ever met. I may be drunk, but no, I genuinely mean it, and if you ask me again when I'm sober, I would still say the same thing. You are awesome, and you are one of the most beautiful guys I have ever met." He complimented me so loudly that the whole room heard and nodded along. I was shocked, and I couldn't help but have a stupid grin on my face. Beautiful? That certainly wasn't the word I was expecting, but I did actually really enjoy the compliments. I did start growing out my hair during the pandemic, so this was the first time ever it was so long. Maybe that's what he was referring to? Still, receiving a compliment from somebody who was openly bisexual really made me feel happy for the rest of the night. It made me think that maybe I would be able to find a partner later on in life who would love and accept me for who I am. The night went on, almost everybody was drunk, and I think there was probably an orgy going on in the other room with how empty the main living room got. Probably. But I legitimately didn't notice because I was too invested in my conversation with the asexual girl in the room. We were talking about books we were reading, and she was talking a whole lot about the Mistborn series of books. And I was just listening and getting invested in the world of those books as she was talking, which I still need to read at some point. Damn it. My one chance I had at losing my virginity, squandered. But you know what? It was totally worth it. That was the end of my first semester of college, and the second semester, I decided to take a break from drama. I wasn't mentally prepared enough to audition for a musical, and I knew I would struggle motivating myself to participate in a production that actually required memorizing a script. I was disappointed when I decided not to do another semester of drama, but I made my decision, and I had to stick with it. I mean, it wasn't all bad. I was taking an astronomy class. I remember liking space as a kid. I needed a natural science credit, and I didn't feel like doing chemistry or biology. So when I made my way to the science building and up the elevator to my class, I mean, I was excited, but I also had no idea what I would be walking into for the rest of the class. My astronomy class was only made up of only about 10 people, but even so, I nestled in a corner where there wouldn't be people bugging me too much. I wanted to enjoy this class without annoying table mates. That plan was foiled immediately when the professor decided to have an icebreaker and put everyone into groups. I was paired with two girls who were clearly already friends. I mentally rolled my eyes, knowing how these situations typically played out. I would be left out while the other two would dominate the conversation. That's how it always goes. Oh, how wrong I was. How completely wrong I was. While it is somewhat rare, there are times in life where I meet somebody and I have a natural chemistry with them. I can just click with them because both of us are on a similar wavelength. I appreciate these people because I can pretty much be my normal, dorky self without needing to put up a front. With these two girls, I would struggle to say we clicked because mixing me into the group immediately caused an explosion of pure, stupid fun. The two girls liked to make small jabs at each other, but then I would say something that would add onto the joke or just make another joke about the comments. And, well, things always escalated until we were unapologetically the loudest people in the room. Even the real chill professor sometimes had to come over and remind us to be quiet. All of us were having fun with the class, engaging in the fascinations of space, but we were also making humorous jabs at each other or talking about whatever the hell else we wanted to. I was worried that a class starting at 6:30 p.m. and ending at 10 would drag on, but 3.5 hours passed by like seconds when I was with those two. And when I came to the second class, I decided to be a little bit bold for the first time in a long, long time. I decided to willingly sit next to the two girls. We had a lot of fun and stupid conversations, but I remember one interaction very clearly. "Hey, Dominic, if you were to describe me in one word, what would that word be?" one of the girls asked. I thought for a moment. She had dirty blonde hair, she was always on Snapchat and Instagram, and she gave off an energy like she jumped straight out of a mid-2000s teen show, like iCarly or Hannah Montana. I settled on a word. Quirky. Quirky? What do you mean by that? The other girl burst out laughing uncontrollably and spoke between her laughter spurts. "You hear that? He's calling you a bitch!" The other girl elbowed the first one when she made that remark, and I also immediately burst into laughter. Not controlled laughter. It was real, genuine laughter. I legitimately couldn't stop laughing, and I had tears in my eyes from my uncontrollable giggle fits. The girl who initially asked the question also joined, and all three of us were just erupting in laughter like maniacs in the middle of class. How I interacted with these two were completely different than how I treat most people. I usually had to restrain my humorous jabs at others because I was afraid of losing friends if things went too far. This time around, I was able to make all the jabs at both of them because I knew we would still be friends through it all. It felt really comforting to have people I trusted to stay my friends. I just felt happy being with them, and all my other worries just vanished during that class in a wave of pure bliss. I felt genuinely happy, no lingering fear or anxiety. I wanted the class to last for an eternity, but Eventually, the semester came to an end. I was still living in the dorm after the last day, panicking about what to do with the school getting ready to kick me out. I tried asking around to see if my family members could house me, but my sisters already had kids and nobody had any room for me. I also received an ominous text from my dad telling me that I didn't have money to keep going to college. Wait, so my dad lied to me about how much money I had? He said I would go to this college for 4 years, but after only 1 year, there was no money in his savings for me? No, there had to be another way. I tried begging the school to let me stay, and they agreed, but only if I had a job and could pay rent. I tried searching for a job, but with literally no job experience and no references, nobody wanted to hire me. And even if I did get a job and pay rent, I was delaying the inevitable. I couldn't afford another year. I broke down and started crying in my own room, and after what felt like forever, I picked up my phone and dialed a number. I had to call him. Hi, is it okay if I move back to your place? The golden thread was slowly pulling me up out of the well, and just when I thought I would make it out of there, I slipped. I fell down that well, and in just one moment, I was back to where I was, after all the efforts it took to try and climb out. What the hell was I doing back here? That was the main thought in my head on my first day back after college. It felt like everything I experienced at college was all for nothing. The classes, the people I met. Why did I go through any of it if I wasn't even going to finish college? I felt like shit. My dad absolutely insisted on me going to college. I mean, he basically did the whole enrollment process for me, yet he didn't know how much the tuition would cost and decided to send me away to college despite that. After just 1 year, the budget ran out. Yeah, on second thought, I should have realized something was up, but I didn't question it because I wanted to believe that my dad genuinely wanted to enrich my life at college and could provide that full 4 year support. I mean, how much money did I have anyway? I did briefly have a student job as a library assistant at the college, but I only saved a little bit of money and made my own bank account for that. A place to keep my money where only I had it. My dad said he had savings in an account for me, but I legitimately did not know what account those savings were in. And I couldn't access the account at all without talking to him first. Did this hypothetical bank account for me even exist? As far as I knew, probably yeah, but how much money was in there? That bank account was just a black box of nebulous money that I had but couldn't access on my own, and I felt enraged that I didn't even have ownership of the account. I sighed and tried to calm down. I should have realized sooner. I should have noticed, so while I was just swindled into getting a bunch of student loans I had to pay off, there was nothing I could really do now. I could ask for access to the bank account, but I highly doubted that my dad would let me do such a thing. The only way I could actually use the money was through methods he approved of. Otherwise, the money practically didn't exist. How would I put that mysterious mass of money to use? I put those thoughts aside. I didn't feel like doing anything about it immediately, and it was summer break, so all of my high school friends were back from college too. So that's what I did. I thought over my course of action while I enjoyed the summer break with my friends. I further developed my channel, making new LPs, and I tried to search for something I could do. Maybe not college necessarily, but something that could lead to a bigger goal of mine. Was there anything I had a particular passion for? I played instruments, but only because I had to as a kid. I already was pursuing recording. Was there anything else I wanted to try out? You know, I guess I always wanted to do improv ever since I was at that show my brother did as a kid. Wait, improv? Improv? I immediately searched online and found nearby locations to do improv classes. I mean, of course, I was only 30 minutes away from the one and biggest improv hubs in the country. Wait, but how was I supposed to drive if I didn't know how to? I immediately groaned in frustration. I had to ask him for help. Again. Why should I take you to improv classes all the way over there? My dad asked when I told him about my idea to do improv classes. Because I think improv will help me control my social anxiety, I quietly said, hoping he would see the value in that. I wasn't lying. That is one big reason for why I wanted to do improv. I just didn't know if he would buy it. And while you do improv classes, are you going to do anything about your actual education? Like what? Your stepmom offered to help you apply to the nearby technical college. It is the best way to get credits while spending relatively small amounts of money. I mean, I suppose, I muttered. I wasn't necessarily against continuing my education. It just felt like an insult to go from a 4 year college education down to only getting an associate's degree. Still, I knew realistically it would help me if I wanted to pursue a bachelor's down the line. I just really hated following the advice my dad gave me. I hated when he said smart things that I could understand the reasoning behind. I'll drive you to comedy sports if you apply for classes, my dad stated. I swallowed my pride. Okay, I'll talk to her tomorrow. I went back to my room and immediately applied for the level 101 short form improv class. I was excited but also really nervous, and ultimately the deal did work out for me on both ends. I did need to continue my education somehow, and I also got improv classes on top of that. All paid for by the nebulous bank account I had no access to otherwise. Despite having to live with my dad again, I felt like I was finally making a little bit of forward momentum out of my own will to overcome my situation, but also to improve myself as a person to make up for my teenage years I spent stagnating in deep depression. I may have fallen back down the well, but I learned how to climb back up that well myself after being pulled up the first time. Instead of simply surviving, I would make my life better by my own hands. If that meant bargaining with my dad and taking whatever small advantages I could, I would do that, even if it involved playing nice with the person that initially ruined my life in the first place. For the next year, improv classes and school classes were about all I did. I still hated being stuck with my dad and certain members of my step family, but I was getting out of the house more often. My classes were interesting, and even if the people weren't so much as fun as the previous campus I went to, I also started working more on my channel and uploading more LPs. More niche games that I either heard about and wanted to play, or just games that I felt like would expand the variety on my channel. This was around the time I started playing Ghost Trick, which to this day is still one of my favorite LPs I recorded because of how much fun I had putting a genuine effort behind doing all the voice acting for the characters. And improv, wow! Improv substantially helped me improve my own social skills. Before, I was just a socially anxious person that was scared to talk to anybody. But the improv community I was with were all supportive and doing completely random, made up, stupid bullshit with people you know nothing about otherwise. It really allowed me to just have fun in a place where I thought it was impossible to. My dad also saw the improvements and he let me keep taking improv. I started out with short form improv, but I quickly got bored of that and I switched to long form improv, which I stuck with for a really long time and had some of the most fun I have ever had on stage. My friend let me borrow some of his weights and barbells to weightlift while he was back in college, and so I was also back lifting too, which kept me physically active and healthier alongside my social health dramatically improving. This routine carried me on until the end of 2023. I was almost done with all the classes I needed to get my associate's degree, and I got another student job as a front desk support. While brief for the 3 months I worked there, I got along with all my coworkers, and I was getting ready to leave once I graduated because I wouldn't be a student worker anymore. I still had absolutely no fucking idea what I wanted to do with my future. The degree I was getting was absolutely useless. I mean, a liberal arts degree. I knew that, but I only selected it because I needed some type of degree, and that was the easiest one for me to collect. Since the liberal arts degree was so new at the technical college, I was only one of two students that obtained it for graduation that year. And I explicitly remember running into the other liberal arts degree student at my job. Hello, how may I help you? I asked in my customer service voice. Uh, Hi, I'm here for career counseling. Let me check you in here real quickly. Are you the 1 o'clock? Yeah, I need to talk to the counselor because I can't get any jobs with this stupid fucking degree. Oh, yeah, I didn't know why I did liberal arts. Wait, you're the other liberal arts student? I also got that degree. Why didn't you show at graduation? The student sternly asked me. I looked away. I mean, he got me there. I didn't attend graduation because I didn't like the idea of attending a ceremony and wearing a robe and going to an event that would last several hours just because I passed classes that were piss easy. Because I actually started taking good notes for stuff after becoming the designated note taker in the ongoing One Piece campaign. It isn't like me to celebrate my achievements, especially when what I was being celebrated for wasn't something I considered as an achievement. I didn't really want to go, I sheepishly admitted. Wow, thanks for abandoning me so I was the only one on stage. "Uh, Sorry. I apologized, and the student quietly sat down in the waiting room, and I simply tried my best not to think about the conversation too much. Still, it was true. There wasn't really anything I could do with a liberal arts degree. That conversation really bugged me for the rest of the day, and even beyond that. What would I do with my degree? When I left that job, I was left unemployed again and doubting all the efforts I made to progress. Would it just be a repeat of what happened last time? Would I just fall back down despite all the effort I put in to find some sort of happiness? I needed to think about how I would move out now that I graduated, and I had to have a plan because I knew my dad would try to kick me out as soon as possible. I talked to my lifting friend, and he also had plans to move out with a mutual friend of ours. He invited me to join, but it was a given that I would need a job to pay rent. Moving out was now my sole motivation for pressing forward. It didn't matter if I couldn't get a dream job, I just needed a job. Any job. Once June hit, I landed a job at Walmart for a good old $14 an hour. I didn't tell my dad about landing this job because when I landed the student job, he always tried to pry the information out of me where all the money I was earning was going, since he didn't notice the bank account he had for me growing in value. I was using my own personal account instead. But anyway, the Walmart was 2 miles away. I had no consistent rides there, and whenever I walked, I would have to walk an hour there. My job was also the online grocery shopper position. So when I walked there, I had to do even more walking. In the middle of the summer, where it was particularly blazing hot in 2024, sometimes I even had to walk back after all of that. Sometimes at the end of the night at a 10 p.m. because they had nobody else to do the closing shift. Point is, I really got my steps in, and there were a few times where I thought I was going to collapse from heat stroke despite having half-gallon water jug on me at all times. I lost at least 30 pounds in that time that I worked there. Even if I only worked at that Walmart for 4 months, I had already accumulated quite a bit of rapport with the regulars. Specifically, some of the drivers picking up other people's orders really grew to like me because I liked talking and learning more about other people alongside being the most friendly and polite Walmart employee they had the pleasure of working with. When they asked why I was working there, I said I was saving up money to move out, and they were nice about it. They understood because, well, they were delivery drivers for Walmart. It's not like their position was much higher up than me. Walmart actually provided me with a few things to take away from the job. The first was gaining a weirdly copious amount of insight on the uniquely confusing hellscape that is the women's underwear aisle. And the second was an interesting environment that allowed for people of all different kinds of beliefs and opinions to coexist. Despite being in a right leaning county politically in the election season of 2024, there were people on both major sides of the political spectrum in that environment, but nobody fought with each other. I mean, why would you? You're working at a Walmart. Are you really going to fight your coworkers when you're standing on the same ground income wise and being overworked as the company starts laying off people and cutting hours while expecting the same amount of work to get done? I didn't enjoy the work at Walmart, but I will say that job did provide an interesting environment to talk to coworkers. My coworkers were fine with expressing their beliefs and ideals to each other, and oddly enough, despite being in a Walmart of all places, the back rooms and break room cultivated a space for safe debate and disagreement among coworkers in a society that has become all too polarized on the most inconsequential of issues. So, I guess if you are ever looking for a good place to have a fair debate with somebody, walk into your local Walmart and head to the employees only area. With my money slowly but surely accumulating while my dad was completely unaware, I was sitting pretty. I had a lot of leftover money from my previous two jobs, and I would be ready to move out and start paying rent. I tried to make plans with my friend to move out, but then I received bad news. The plans to move out fell through. My friend decided he wanted to stay at his parents' place for a while and get his personal trainer certifications during that. I really wanted to move out, but I supported his decision because I knew he cared about that and he was probably a bit light on money too. So I had no place to move out and I worked at Walmart and saved all that money for no reason. I mean, money is money, but still, it felt like a useless endeavor. I didn't have a backup plan. I mean, how would I move out if I had nobody to live with? It's not like I could live by myself, what with housing costs today, and just when I thought all hope was lost, I received a call from my brother. To summarize the call, he basically offered to let me live with him and my older other brother. He needed me to help pay the down payment of the house they were living in because the owners suddenly decided they wanted to sell it and they had first dibs. I agreed because I literally had no other options, and the money that would be used to buy the house would be coming from the Pandora's box of a bank account my dad held for me. After getting the lease, my brothers owned the house, and I had the opportunity to move in when I was ready. I thought about staying a bit longer to tie up loose ends on the improv side of things, but after quitting the Walmart job, I didn't want to stay in that home any longer. I was so close to freedom. I just needed to overcome one more hurdle of actually moving. I was nervous about living with my brothers because I hadn't seen them that often during the past 10 years. I didn't know how they changed, if at all, but I would rather take them than my dad. My pure motivation for expediting the move was a simple one. I just wanted to be in an environment where I could be more true to myself. I didn't want to be with my dad anymore. I'm done with him. All the shit he put me through, all the expectations he set on me, and worst of all is his constant comparisons he made between me and himself at my age. He never saw me for who I was, just a different person that acts just like he did, which I absolutely refused to be. I couldn't tolerate it anymore, and I didn't have to, so I was finally able to escape for good in November of 2024. Now I am living with my two brothers. I'm not going to say my situation is perfect now. It definitely isn't, and there are a lot of aspects about living with my brothers that are awful. I could go on forever about minor to major complaints I have about the housing situation. However, I am talking in present tense right now. I am currently living through this, and I would not have anything to contribute beyond my gripes with the living situation. Still, despite my grievances about the situation, I am in a lot better of a situation than I was before. I'm not stuck with my dad anymore, and I silently cut him out of my life. Some may say I'm cruel for doing that, but quite frankly, I don't give a shit about him anymore. I'm done with him, and any disrespect I'm giving him by doing this is much, much less worse of the acts that he committed to me. I cannot find it in my heart to forgive him. I don't know if I ever will. But I have found the motivation and drive to pursue my own life. I have removed the shackles that others have placed on me, and now I'm working on removing my own. I recently got a job as an optician that I surprisingly enjoy a lot more than I thought I would. My coworkers are all really friendly, and many of the patients I work with are also very friendly and sometimes absolutely crazy, but that's just a given in any part of customer service. Walmart braced me for the worst in people, so I can handle it. I'm putting more focus into my hobbies, and I'm also trying to slowly develop an aesthetic for myself that I never had an opportunity to do in my teens. I also decided to give therapy a second chance, and I'm now actively seeing somebody to help me sort through my past and also help me realize my future. I'm finally living a normal life now. Or I guess as normal as I'm willing to accept. Would I say I'm happy with myself? Honestly, that's hard to say. However, I can say that I don't actively hate myself for existing every single hour of every single day. My negative thoughts, while not purged completely, are muted enough for me to actually listen to what else I have to think about, and they have given me time to sit down and genuinely think about myself in a new light. While I wish I could say I have all the answers to cure depression and how to stay happy through a really shitty situation, I don't. I simply survived and somehow left with my humanity still intact. While I may not have any profound answers, I will at least say this. Even among all the misery I suffered the past decade, I still had moments where I had a lot of fun. I had friends to cheer me on when I forgot how to, and through those friends, I was able to keep on pushing myself whenever I gave up hope for myself. It wasn't a pleasant feeling. Sometimes I felt like I was dragging myself across a never ending desert, hoping for an oasis to appear, but only getting tricked by mirages. I don't know why I persisted, but now I'm glad I did. I may not have fallen into a perfect life, but I fell into a lifestyle that has a future that I can change. A future that I can mold for myself instead of others stealing it from me. And that is essentially what I'm living for. I recently realized that I have been living to fulfill expectations I thought others had for me, when in reality, nobody has any expectations for me. Almost nobody I looked up to was concerned about me during my depression. Anybody who offered a helping hand to me never wanted to follow through with providing one when I asked. In the void of kindness I never received, I decided to become that light that would help other people, but in doing so, people constantly exploited my patience, backing out of agreements, asking for forgiveness, and making excuses, and asking me for favors when they can get away with it without doing anything in return. In my pursuit of becoming somebody who could help others, I ended up being used, manipulated constantly by my dad, giving others undeserved benefit of the doubt, which led to me constantly questioning myself, and being asked for favors among many people without being given gratitude. When I fell into a loop where I made the people around me happy, I wasn't making myself happy in the process. I felt awful, absolutely miserable, and very much alone. I was slowly destroying myself bit by bit, listening to people and trying to help them where nobody else would. And every time I helped them, I received no thanks, or I learned they were being dishonest about their circumstances after the fact. I, every time that happened, I felt just a little bit more jaded towards humanity. With myself being so overtly forgiving and patient with others due to my own experiences, I became an emotional punching bag for everyone around me. I became the friend to talk to when somebody needed to vent. I cannot tell you just how many times people around me, whether it be my friends, family, coworkers, or complete random strangers that have confessed stuff to me, whether it be their thoughts and feelings on important life decisions, gossiping about their coworkers, and using me as an emotional punching bag whenever something bad happened that day, or unnecessarily trauma dumping on me and expecting me to listen to their story when they don't care about mine. I get it. I'm an easy person to talk to since I like listening to other people. That's a feature. not a bug. But even I have my limits, and at a certain point, I just have to say no. Not yes and, not no but, just no. After acting as a beacon of forgiveness with the sagest patience for so long, I have come to realize that many of the people who really truly need help don't attract to the light. They linger in the dark because they either don't trust others enough to ask for help, they can't due to their own circumstances, or the scariest possibility of them all, they forgot how to ask. And so, with this video, I decided to reach out to those people in the dark. I don't expect any of you to comment or even watch the video all the way through to this point, but this is my attempt of at least letting some acknowledgement shine on those of you suffering who would otherwise get none. This will be my final act as that beacon of patience I portrayed myself as, and my first step towards deconstructing that act and becoming the person I truly want to be at my core, while confidently presenting myself. Just like how my favorite game has done so and changed my life for it, and like how my mom found the confidence within her to be herself in the early months before her death. While I may not have deconstructed that act yet, I now know what I have to do, and I have a goal. I have a legitimate reason to live now. Not for the present, but the future. A future where I can live for myself instead of others. A future where I can enjoy the present. I may not have achieved my goals yet, but I can feel myself making progress towards them. And that alone is making me happy enough to be glad I survived. And I can only imagine how satisfied I will be once I fulfill them. This video is part of that transitional process. For me to step to the future I want, I had to acknowledge my past and put it to rest so it won't haunt me anymore. I'm not going to toss aside the entirety of my past and pretend it never happened. I mean, my scars will never fully heal, but I'm not going to let my past define who I am now. I'm done giving myself excuses to be apathetic and lazy. I want to finally live my life, not the life others wanted me to live. I want to provide a motivation and a goal for those in the dark to strive for by being myself. And instead of offering to help others out of the darkness, they'll find the drive and the confidence to bring themselves out of the darkness. After the past 10 years of living my own personal hell, this is the conclusion I have reached. It may not be a perfect conclusion, and there may be gaps in the logic, but I'm still proud of it. This is one of the first things in a long time I can truly say is my own decision. A representation of my true, unbridled self. A conclusion created from the wisdom I have accumulated during both the good and the bad parts of my life. Your conclusion does not have to be the same as mine, and you don't have to reach your conclusion the same way I did. But I do hope that whatever conclusion you do reach is one you reach of your own decision. I wonder, what conclusion will you reach?